You're watching VinylicPumaGaming. So as I've said in previous videos, Fallout 4 was a fun game. You may disagree, but I actually liked it despite some of its flaws. However, as with all things, and as I sort of just implied, Fallout 4 wasn't perfect, and I think in many ways, Fallout 4's ending is pretty lacking. While you get individual choices as to how the game ends, like you do in Fallout New Vegas, your choices have little consequence on what happens after the main story ends. So today, I'm going to discuss Fallout 4's ending compared to the endings from previous games, and also discuss things that I think would have made it better. So, let's get into it. In reality, Fallout 4 has two endings. Either you destroy the Institute as a part of the nuclear option, or you preserve the Institute as a part of nuclear family. However, as far as the nuclear option is concerned, there are actually three different versions of the nuclear option ending, and those involve siding with either the Minutemen, the Railroad, or the Brotherhood of Steel. So you could also say that there are four faction endings for Fallout 4, however, three of them are very similar with some variation. I say this because after a certain point, all three of the nuclear option endings involve entering the Institute, overriding the lockdown procedure, reaching the reactor, planting a fusion bomb, rescuing or abandoning the child synth Sean, teleporting to the top of mass fusion, and then blowing up the Institute. The process to getting to this point is certainly different for each faction, but the outcome is pretty much identical. Now, it should also be mentioned that there are some interesting variations for some of these endings. Most of them involve progressing through the game under certain conditions, like not ever meeting the Minutemen at the very beginning of the game, or being allied with the Minutemen and then choosing not to activate the evacuation signal while in the Institute. If that occurs, this leads to the Railroad becoming hostile with the Minutemen. I would say for the most part, though, that the Brotherhood and Railroad endings have little variation, while the Minutemen and Institute endings have a little bit more. Ultimately, you're either blowing up the Institute as a member of the three factions, or you side with the Institute. There are some things you can do before and after that change things somewhat, but there are still really only four faction endings. Another thing that's important to mention are the ending screens for Fallout 4. Like Fallout 3 and New Vegas before it, Fallout 4 plays a couple stills with narration talking about some of what happened while you played. There are two primary factors that determine the endgame stills. Those are whether you picked nuclear family or nuclear option, and whether your player character is male or female. The types of quests you complete don't really affect this narration at all. Only the final quest and the sex you pick determines both what stills appear and whether you get Nate or Nora narrating for those endgame stills. Now, I'd like to discuss the endings for the previous Fallout games in the franchise. I'll mostly be talking about Fallout 3 and New Vegas here. That's not to say that Fallout 2, Tactics, and the original Fallout are bad games. I just don't know quite as much about how those games end, and I don't feel as comfortable discussing the endings of those games. So, sue me. Like Fallout 4, Fallout New Vegas has four faction endings. You can choose to side with the Legion, the NCR, Mr. House, or you could create an independent New Vegas with Yes Man. In a certain sense, you could say that the Legion ending is the most different of the four, while the NCR, Independent, and Mr. House endings are relatively similar, as a similar ending exchange with General Oliver occurs. With the Legion, you can talk to Legate Lanius at the very ending of the game, and that is a different exchange than the other three. Now, I know that some people are going to say that this is a gross oversimplification of New Vegas's endings, and to a certain extent, I would say that they are right. Unlike Fallout 4, there are many conditions that can occur depending on whether you have good, neutral, or bad karma. There are also conditions that involve whether you upgraded the Securitrons or not for the Yes Man or Independent ending, and whether you let Caesar die or not for the Legion ending. And of the four major faction endings, the NCR and Mr. House endings have the least variation. We also have to acknowledge that the factions that you ally with for the Battle of Hoover Dam and some of the various side quests that you can complete also affect the ending and affect the endgame slides. For example, not repairing Edie will yield a different endgame slide, while repairing and completing its side quest will yield another. Fallout 3's ending, on the other hand, is a little bit more of a mess, as it depends on whether you have broken steel installed or not. Like New Vegas, karma plays a factor in the ending. The ending is also affected by whether you destroy Raven Rock or not, whether you add FEV to the water purifier or not, and whether you or one of your followers entered the Project Purity Chamber or not. Also, like New Vegas, completing certain side quests has an effect on the endgame slides that play, though this isn't quite nearly as advanced as it was in Fallout New Vegas, where in that game, the specifics of how and whether you completed the quest or not are detailed. In a certain way, the ending for Fallout 3 is relatively complex, as you can have multiple different endings. It comes down to whether you activate Project Purity or not, you sacrifice yourself at Project Purity or not, and whether you add FEV to the water or not. Maybe you could say that there are 3 endings, with one of them involving contaminating the water supply or not, and call that a variation. Or, because the ending is determined by one quest, there's really only one ending with several variations based on your karma and some other factors. Now, originally, Fallout 3 didn't let you continue playing upon completing the game, as the lone wanderer usually dies. However, the Broken Steel DLC allows you to continue playing by altering the ending to where the sole survivor survives and offers some additional content. Broken Steel's ending either results in the destruction of Adams Air Force Base or not. So there are 2 possible endings there. Either you destroy the Enclave mobile crawler, or you wipe out the Citadel. The biggest difference here is what slideshow you get at the end. New Vegas and Fallout 3 have significantly more complex endgame slideshows, and your choices throughout the game greatly affect the slideshow. For Fallout 4, the only things that determine your endgame slideshow are whether you sided with the Institute or not, and whether you chose Nate or Nora at the very beginning of the game. As far as gameplay is concerned, Fallout 4's ending is very similar to Fallout New Vegas' ending in the sense that you can pick between 4 faction endings. The difference is that karma and allegiances in New Vegas greatly affect the game's ending, and there's nothing like that in Fallout 4. I think the biggest flaw or mistake with Fallout 4's ending are the ending slides and how they are simply not detailed enough. One of my personal and maybe some other people's complaints with Fallout 4 is that the events of Fallout 4 truly never felt resolved. Yeah, you blew up the Institute or you wiped out all the factions, but what happens after that? What happens weeks after the events of the game occur? Now, having more endgame slides could have been a great opportunity to explain what happens in the future based on the choices you made while you were playing the game, like New Vegas did. In New Vegas, if you picked the Yes Man or Independent ending, the ending narration tells you what happened to New Vegas after you made that decision. This is also the case for the other 3 endings. Imagine if we knew what happened to the Brotherhood of Steel, the Railroad, or the Minutemen if the player chose those endings in Fallout 4. Maybe the Brotherhood sets up a military base in the region and provides aid to the local populace as an example. Or maybe the Brotherhood of Steel declares martial law and Brotherhood patrols stop caravans and take any valuable technology. I think another mistake with the ending slides in particular is that none of Fallout 4's various side quests affect the ending slides you see. This is sort of odd considering that Fallout 3 and New Vegas did this while Fallout 4 makes no attempt to do so. As a few examples, it would have been nice to see what happens to the Cabot family, the USS Constitution, or to Vault 81 depending on the player's actions as they played through the game. Even paying some lip service to what happens in these situations would have been better than the current ending slides that we got. Slides dedicated to more important companions would have also been really great. For New Vegas, you can get specific slides dedicated to Veronica, Arcade Gannon, and Rose of Sharon Cassidy as a few examples, and they were greatly affected depending on your choices throughout the game. As it pertains to Fallout 4, it would have been really interesting to find out what happens to X688 if you blow up the Institute, or what happens to Paladin Dance if you decide to destroy the Brotherhood of Steel after sparing his life. Ultimately, I think if the ending slides of Fallout 4 were better, the ending overall would have been more satisfying than it was. Another thing that would have made Fallout 4's ending better was if karma had an effect on the game's ending, like it did in Fallout 1, 2, 3, New Vegas, and even Tactics. I think the obvious choice here would have been to go with Fallout New Vegas' karma system, where it was somewhat determined by how the other factions in the game perceived you. Now, I know Fallout 4 doesn't have a karma system per se, but it does have a companion affinity system which can sort of be used to determine the player's karma. As an example, having good relations with Nick Valentine, Piper, and Preston may result in a good karma ending, or maybe having good relations with Strong, X688, and Porter Gage from Nuka World results in a bad karma ending. Maybe some of the other companions like Kate and McCready result in neutral karma endings. Perhaps certain actions during quests could also affect karma as well. So for example, if you sell Billy during the Kid in the Fridge side quest, maybe that will net you negative karma. Or maybe helping Lorenzo or Jack Cabot during the Cabot side quests will result in either bad or good karma respectively, and thus affect the ending. So for the most part, up until this point, I've been primarily making suggestions that don't really change the story that much. While I suggested the introduction of a karma system and having it affect the ending, I haven't really advocated for changing the way Fallout 4 itself plays, nor have I suggested any changes to the plot itself, so that's what I'm going to be talking about now. Fallout 4 in general is a game that would really benefit from allowing the player to have a lot more choices. I think it would have been really cool if there were a lot more interesting and unique variations of each of the endings. For example, there is some cut content for Fallout 4 that reveals that at one point in development, Bethesda had planned on allowing Paladin Danse to rejoin you as a companion, and the two of you would overthrow Elder Maxon. As a result, you would become the Brotherhood's new Elder. Another interesting ending would be for the Minutemen. While the Minutemen are pretty much considered to be the good guys in Fallout 4, an interesting twist would have been to corrupt the Minutemen in some way. Now I am going to change the subject somewhat, but I do think it's relevant. Something that was possible in Knights of the Old Republic 2 was that you could corrupt your fellow companions and put them on the path of becoming Jedis or Sith. In Fallout 4, this is explored somewhat with Piper Wright. If you achieve high affinity with her and you choose the Institute ending, she writes an article in Public Occurrences called Fear the Future that's essentially a damage control piece for the Institute, an organization she has traditionally hated but comes to respect due to her admiration for the sole survivor. But back to the Minutemen. What if there was a way to where you could corrupt Preston Garvey once you had obtained high affinity with him? You could change the course of the Commonwealth Minutemen to a much darker path. The ability to corrupt or redeem companions would have been very interesting, especially if it affected their overall appearance like it does in Knights of the Old Republic 2. Or what about a good Institute ending? Perhaps you could convince Father and the Institute Board of Directors the error of their ways. What if there was a way for them to make amends with both the people of the Commonwealth, as well as both the Brotherhood of Steel and the Railroad? Maybe you get high affinity with X688 and he convinces other people within the Institute to join your cause in shaping the Institute for a higher karma outcome. At the end of the day, I think it's pretty hard to say how Fallout 4 should have ended, though I would have liked more alternate choices within some of the endings. In a certain sense, the Institute ending is the path of least resistance, and having a good outcome for that ending, or the choice between both a good and bad ending, would have been better. Having the choice to kill Maxon and corrupt the Brotherhood of Steel was a choice that appears to have been in the works, but it was scrapped during the development cycle due to them not having enough time or something else. I guess in the meantime, I just wish whatever the choices Fallout 4 had were more meaningful and they were reflected in the endgame slides for the game. Both Fallout 3 and New Vegas had this, yet Fallout 4 didn't, and it's strange that for a game that's supposed to evolve beyond its predecessors, it doesn't have one of the more basic features of its predecessors. Hopefully the next Fallout game will make the player's choice matter a lot more next time around. Alright guys, that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, and as always, take care, and I'll see y'all next time.